Welcome back to the second skill of creating empowering alternatives by using transformational vocabulary. So let's get started.
What I want to do now is get you to focus a little bit. And we're going to focus on a couple of subjects that are very, very simple, but very powerful. So sit up in your chair and put yourself in a focused state. These principles that we're going to talk about here will help you to make changes at such a rapid pace. And the way to make change is so simple that for those of you who have not been exposed to my sharing it with you before, those who haven't had a chance to use it yet, you're going to have a hard time believing it could really work that easily. But I'm telling you, when I first came up with the distinctions, I didn't believe it either, but it works. Specifically, what we're going to talk about is what I call transformational vocabulary. A lot of research shows that when two people interact, words play the smallest impact on what actually influences how a person feels. What usually influences more of it than words? That's right, your tonality, and what influences even more? Physiology. There's no doubt that that is true. However, words have unbelievable power. Words by themselves have unbelievable power to move people if you choose the right words. And the words that you're using moment to moment as you live are shaping your destiny. And the reason is, think about it, throughout history, different people have selected words that have moved us because the right words don't just get us to listen, but the right words will move us to action. See, our country here in the US was formed by a few people who put the right words together. And actions were moved by a few people. When Patrick Henry got up way back when, right, and said, I don't know what course others will take, but as for me, give me liberty or give me death. And he did it with every ounce of congruency in his soul. He moved mass number of people to take action. It wasn't just words. You know, when they got together and put this thing called the Declaration of Independence together, it wasn't just words. Those words represented actions. They were very specific words, words that would move men and women for decades, for centuries. Martin Luther King used words, I have a dream. John F. Kennedy used words. Words can make us laugh, they can make us cry, they can wound us, and they can heal us. Words can change the way you think, and they can change the way you feel in an instant. And most of us know this, but we don't use it on ourselves. We just think about other great leaders and how they use words to move us. We got to start thinking about ourselves. One word can change your state. Think of a word like chivalry. Does that feel different than being gentlemanly? You better believe it. Or you think of a word like nobility, or integrity, or impeccability. These bring up all kinds of other images and sounds and feelings. Words create a biochemical effect on our body. And so what we've got to do is become sensitized to the words that we use. Not where we're freaked out about them, but where we're very clear that words do have an impact. And what really impacts us are the consistent words that we use. The habitual words that we use are shaping who we are. And here's how and why. First of all, think about it. Every one of us in this room have experiences, but our experiences have to be taken in through this funnel called our brain. And as we start to get certain sounds and tonalities, and we hear certain consonants or vowels, and there are certain movements in a person, gesturing in their face, all this stuff is coming into your brain right now. And your brain very quickly has to determine, what is this what? And what should I what? So your brain is constantly creating shortcuts to be able to make that decision more quickly. Because if you can decide more quickly, it's likely you can avoid pain more often and you can get pleasure more often. So we as human beings have created a series of ways to make shortcuts to know what things mean and what to do. If every time something happened, you had to search your brain for every other time you saw this imagery, you heard these exact sounds in this exact same way, and you had to search all your references, it would take a long time to decide. So instead, your brain has developed belief systems. Belief systems are nothing but generalizations. See, when you go out and you come to a door, like we have around this room, you don't actually know how to open that door. You generalize you know how to open that door. You believe you know how to open that door. If every time you went to one of those doors, you had to search your memory to see a door that was exactly like this in this exact same way, it would take you forever. But your brain is generalized and says, if a door looks like that, it usually push-pull, turn it sideways, turn it this way, and invariably it'll open. You've generalized, and that saves you time. So generalizations sometimes empower us, don't they? Sometimes generalizations disempower us, like love is destructive. See, maybe once you saw something and misinterpreted what it meant, and now that becomes your shortcut. And sometimes our shortcuts shortchange us. All beliefs are made up of words. an important distinction. Your beliefs are made up of words. If we change one word within the belief system that you have, we will change the belief. One word. Because words create a different shade of meaning and emotion and sensation. So we want to listen to the words that people are using as part of the diagnostic process. Remember I told you my antenna going? I'll tell you one of the things I'm noticing. I'm always noticing somebody's physiology. My antenna notices what's their body like because I know everything's being filtered through the way they're using their body. I'm always listening for limiting beliefs, but the first thing is physiology. The second thing for me is what I call transformational vocabulary. I'm listening for words that I know are creating limits within that person as they speak or even as they think out loud. Those words are the basis of your ability to represent to yourself what is happening in the world. Let me clarify even more by giving you a little bit of frame of reference. All these sensations are coming in, and they're being brought into this funnel called your brain. Your brain's got to figure out, what does this mean? So what it does is it gets these sensations, is it starts to generalize so it can make a decision more quickly. And what it has to do is put a label on this to speed the process up. So imagine this funnel of liquid sensation. By the way, when you say I feel angry, is anger always the exact same sensations? Yes or no? It may feel like it because once you call it anger, you have an anchor to what anger is, and you trigger all those sensations you call anger into the experience. But right before you called it anger, it may have had varying levels of liquid sensation within you. Are you following the metaphor? Like sometimes something happens, you really get angry. Sometimes you get in between angry. Sometimes it's all over there. But some of you have habitual ways of describing any level of pain that you categorize as anger, and you call it all anger. And the minute you do, you may take something that was a little bit upsetting and you make it anger immediately, and you intensify the emotion. How many are following the process? Now, this distinction, think of it again like a funnel, and imagine that the words that you and I habitually use, are like little patterns down here, like cookie cutters, if you would. If these little forms down here come along, and some are square and some are triangle, and it fits down in here, and you've only got 3 forms to fit it in, you got about 3 emotions you're going to feel. Because the minute you take your experience of life and put a word to it, it becomes what you call it. Your brain instantly fires off the biochemistry attached to that word, and that is your experience. And if you got 3 words, you got 3 experiences of life, and that's why most of you have 12 emotions, because you got 12 words you use habitually to describe your pain and pleasure. It's not that you don't have other sensations. It's that you don't experience them because you label them ineffectively. Now, what's the truth? The truth of the matter is, in the English language, we have 500,000 words in our language. We have the largest language in the world. Nothing even close. Closest thing is Germany, and it is a distant second. So we have all these words. So out of those words, we have over 3,000 words that describe emotion. 3,000 words. And out of the 3,000 words that describe emotion, you selected 12. And that's why you experience them. Because you could be calling it something else that probably would be even more precise, but you only got these 1 or 2 or 3 little designs here, and they come in and you stick it in there, and sure enough, you go, there I go again. Always happens to me, can't figure out why. Just because I call it this, maybe that's why. But if you became more precise in your distinction about what word to use, you might be able to change your entire life just by changing habitual vocabulary, because the minute you put the label, you begin to have the experience. Before that, it's only sensation. When you put the label, it becomes perception. And we respond more to our perceptions than our sensations. We don't know what our sensations mean yet. When you organize them into a perception, that's when you begin to feel and respond. Have you ever been in a place where you're not quite sure how to feel about something? How many of you have ever been in that place? That's when you're experiencing sensations, and you're still just sensing things. You haven't perceived them yet. When you perceive it, as you organize it into imagery, organize it into meaning, you organize it into a label, if you will. And words is one of the number 1 ways we've learned as a shortcut to tell ourselves what something means so we can deal with it. It's also one of the number 1 ways we've learned to communicate to other people, right? How else do you tell somebody what you're feeling? So you pull in there and pull out a word. But these shortcuts shortchange us emotionally unless we expand our references. And to give you an idea, what triggered me to go through this whole experience was I was in a meeting one day with my CEO at the time for one of my major companies and a good friend of both of ours, a mutual good friend who's a very, very successful entrepreneur, very successful. And we were all in this meeting, And somebody came in the meeting and gave us feedback about a certain individual we were negotiating with. And the feedback they gave us made us all believe this guy totally had leverage that was inappropriate and unfair, and he took advantage of it. And he was trying to rip us off in all our perceptions. There really wasn't much we could do in that short-term moment. So we were in one of those positions where it'd be real easy to feel what? Helpless, right? Not much we could do. I mean, we're gonna get pain no matter what happens because he'd wired the game that way, and we'd fallen in the trap because we trusted him, and he was a liar. So when you get those kinds of things happen and somebody violates your trust, what kind of sensations do most of us feel? Upset of some sort, right? But what do you call those? Some of you say, well, it depends on how angry I get. That's true. You know what happened in the meeting? All three of us responded completely different to the exact same information. I got really angry. I was like, I can't even believe he did this. Oh man, I was really angry about it. What's interesting is my CEO next to me went absolutely bonkers. Rage. I mean, even by my anger level, and I was upset, I thought this guy lost it. It's like, I can't even believe it. I can't believe it. I mean, I am so much rage. I am so livid. Oh, God, I can't believe it. And I was like, mellow out. What's the deal, you know? I mean, it's really upsetting, but geez. Meanwhile, my buddy over here next to me, he's just sitting here going, oh, well. I'm like looking around going, what is the deal here? I couldn't help but notice the radical differences between the three of us, and we were all impacted equally in terms of consequences. So what do you think went through my head? My brain's always asking questions. I said, wait a second, what is this? What's going on here? Why are we responding differently? I thought, okay, based on the organizing principle of all human behavior, what's going on here? If he's willing to go into rage, he must link lots of what to going into rage? The opportunity to get out of what? And get into what? And sure enough, I asked him, I said, what does it mean for you? When you get into rage like that, what does it mean to go into rage? He said, if I'm in rage like this, I can handle anything. Nothing stops me. So what has he linked? Clearly. Power, a sense of being able to take control of his life, which takes him out of pain and puts him into pleasure. Then I went to my other buddy, and I said, doesn't this make you angry? He said, no, it kind of annoys me. I said, annoys you? He said, yeah, it kind of peeves me a little bit. I said, peeves you? Peeves you? I said, what a stupid word. I can't even believe this. I said, what does it mean to you to get upset? He said, well, if you get upset, you lose control. I said, yeah, and what happens then? He said, then the other guy wins. He links lots of what to being upset? Pain. And what does he link to not getting upset? Power and pleasure, because now he's in control, right? If he doesn't get upset, the other guy's not going to win, and he was a very competitive guy. All of a sudden, I understood why he behaved the way he did. Then I thought, what about me? What do I believe? I believe you get me upset, I'm like razor sharp. You get me unupset, I'm razor sharp. I can do it either way. So I don't avoid being upset. If I get upset, I use it. If I'm not upset, I don't use it. I can do it either way. So I'm not going to go to the extreme on my one buddy, but at the same time, I didn't have this linkage that, you know, being like this is the way to be either. That seemed like weird and wimpy. Why would you? Peeved, I'm peeved. It's like, God, you know, that annoys me. You know, it's like, I just realized I've never seen you really upset. He said, no, not really. Upset's not something I really get. I said, don't you ever get angry? The CEO went, don't you ever go into rage? And I'm like, you know, relax, right? You know? And he said, no. He said, I get a little peeved, a little annoyed. Every once in a while, I get a little tinkled. I said, tinkled? And he started to laugh like crazy, and I was like, this is the weirdest stuff, you know? So I said, what about that time when the IRS came and they took his money, they took $250,000 of his right out of his bank accounts, and they were wrong. And it took him 2.5 years to get his money back. One agent just got like this little hair in the wrong place and got upset about him. And as a result, he went after my buddy, and he took total advantage. I said, didn't that make you angry? The other guy's going, I'd kill him, I'd kill him. You know? He goes, it really peeved me. I said, come on. He said, no, I was peeved, I was tinkled, I was annoyed, but that was about it. I said, I don't understand. And then I started realizing, if I kept thinking to myself, this really peeves me, I would never get upset. Because it would break my pattern. I feel like such an idiot saying the word, you know? And so it kind of like stuck in my head, you know? And so I kept thinking about this and thinking about how we all reacted so differently. One guy's words were rage, I'm livid. The other guy's, I'm angry. The other one's, I'm peeved and tinkled. And I thought, what would happen if, for a week, I didn't use the word anger to describe how I was feeling? I don't want to get rid of it. I want to have the choice to be able to be in that state. It can be a resource at times. But what would happen if that wasn't my tool of first resort when I was upset? What if I used, this annoys me, or this peeves me, and I thought, geez, I can't say that. I just see it. You know what? This is really peeving me. You know? So I thought, well, it'll probably be a great pattern up. So you know what I did? For a week, I tried it. Blew my mind. I'll never forget the first time I used it. I was on the road. I flew into the city. I come in there. I get about 1 o'clock in the morning to the hotel. I got to be up early in the morning to the seminar. And, you know, my staff usually gets there and checks me in. Well, I get there. I'm not checked in. So I get to the front desk, and this person who died 4 years ago and is still working at the front desk kind of like walks up kind of like this to the front desk, like this, you know, and then hunts and pecks my name into the computer, you know, and can't seem to find it. And I'm like, then I finally turned to this person. I said, you know, I know this isn't your fault, but I'm getting a bit peeved. This person looked up, started grinning. I started grinning. I just totally wiped out my state right there. And I said, you know, I really like your help, and I'm really tired. And that's all it took. Person said, oh, I'm so sorry. Here, just take the key, and I'll figure it all later. I was like, whoa, I like peeve, cool stuff. I started linking what to it? Pleasure, that's right. This is hot stuff. And you know what? I started using it more and more and more. I also found it helped me communicate better when I was upset with somebody, that I got a much better result. If I called up and I said, you know, this is just annoying me a little bit. I really appreciate your help. Rather than calling him and saying, you know, this really makes me angry. That puts people on the defensive, doesn't it? And I learned how to soften it even more from there. But see, one of the things in my life was I'm a very intense person. And that on the pleasure side, unbelievably intense. But I used to also be really intense on the other side. If something upset me, boy, I really would lose it, just like I lose it on the positive side on the good one. So it was like double-edged sword. I mean, I called it all passion. That's all being passionate. But that's changed. I can still get strong if I want to get strong, don't get me wrong, but it's not where I start by any stretch. Some of my staff used to travel with me. They knew, man, if something went wrong, I was definitely volatile. I want everything to be perfect for people. Right? And I demand that much for myself, so I demand it from everybody else too. And boom, I'd lose it because I'd use these words. So what I began to do is I began to say, you know what? Here's what happened. We had 3 people together, and we all had a funnel, the same funnel of experience, same sensations very much coming in. We all were seeing, hearing, and seeing the same thing, except here was the difference. We all had different little forms, and one guy had livid and rage and kill somebody, and mine was angry, and this guy's peeved and tinkled and a little annoyed. And when the same sensations came in, we just put them in our form, and that's what we felt. And I realized I used to feel that way a lot because I used the label a lot. So I went over to see Bob Bays one day, a friend of mine, and we were chatting, and I started telling him all about this. And I said, you know what? This is so simplistic. I have a hard time believing you could do it this quickly. But if we just change the habitual language we use, we would totally change our emotional states consistently for the rest of our lives. And just by changing the words. And he said, this is amazing. And Bob started sharing with me about an experience he'd had only a few days before. He'd been on the road like me. He had been burnt to the core, really exhausted. He came home, and Bob's got a really neat place in Malibu right down on the beach. But it's not huge, and it's not really great to have a lot of guests there because there's really no place for him to be. While Bob was on the road, Brandon had come along, his wife, and invited a few friends to stay over. Plus, their daughter had come to stay for a couple days and decided to stay for a month in this tiny little bungalow on the beach. There's no room to even turn around and move with that many people in there. So can you imagine the kind of state that Robert was in at this point? He was near, what's the key emotional state where people lose it? Threshold. He was definitely at an emotional threshold, and he lost it. And what pushed him over the edge was the one thing he wanted, all he asked for, was he'd set up his VCR and he wanted to have some game, a baseball or football game, taped. And when he got home and somebody had messed with that, he lost it. And he found out it was his daughter, and he totally unleashed. And he started yelling and screaming at her with absolute rage, using 4-letter words, which Bob never does, and had never done in her entire life up until that point, in her 20s, of actually raging at her in that language. And she freaked out and burst into tears. The way he describes it is she whined all over the place. That's also transformational vocabulary. Right? Is whining transformational vocabulary? Sure is. It's describing transforming the experience through words. That's what transformational vocabulary is. It's when you take sensation and you transform it through language. Transformational vocabulary transforms your experience. And by the way, you can transform your experience into something more pleasurable or more painful. So Bob loses it, but the most funny part of the whole thing is Brandon is there, and she assumes this is a pattern interrupt and starts cracking up hysterically. Bob was wishing it was a pattern interrupt. He wished he thought of that. she's cracking up. She thinks for sure it's that. And then she realizes it's not. And Brandon was so perceptive. She went up to Bob afterwards. She said, Bob, she said, you've never done this before. I've never seen you act this way ever with her. She said, you've never done that. Kelly, their daughter, you're doing something that Kelly does. She has these emotional explosions every now and then. And I noticed something. You're behaving like she behaves, and you're using a word she always uses, a word you never use. You always talk about being overloaded. But I noticed you've been saying for the last week, you keep saying you're overwhelmed. And that's the thing she always says right before she loses it. I thought, wow, is it possible that by adopting someone's language patterns, you would adopt their emotional patterns as well? And as I began to test it, I found it's absolutely accurate, especially if you model their physiology when you say the words and their gestures. And by the way, how many of you have words that are part of your vocabulary, maybe even phrases that you picked up from your parents that you even to this day use the same way they use them, meaning the same kind of tonality and elements? How many of you got some of those you're aware of? I'm curious. I have a few. My father, my fourth father, one I had the closest relationship with, he used to walk home at days, and he used to walk in the door right after work, and he would yell, "Monkey gurus," for like no reason. It made no sense. We all went into a deep trance, right? But he had such a good time. We all started doing the same thing. We had no clue what we were doing. He used to call people dudes before it was like the popular thing to do, and we all did that. And to this day, I still call my kids dudes and dudesses and tease them in the same way. The same tonality comes out of me, and I feel the same emotions as I felt then. I also discovered angry language came from my family as well. That's exactly what my dad would do when he lost it. And I was using his same language pattern, feeling his same emotions, his same intensity. How many can relate to this? I'm curious. So I began to think, wow, you know what? This works not only on the negative side, though, it works on the positive. See, do you think that if you have an experience of pleasure coming through here, does the amount of pleasure, is that based upon your actual experience or based upon the label you put upon it? What do you think? Here's what I want you to put in your notes. The label you put on your experience becomes your experience. The label you put on your experience becomes your experience. The minute you say, "This is humiliating," you're right. But maybe what it is a little bit uncomfortable. Would that make a difference in how you feel, yes or no? You better believe it. And you know what? Some people have these intense words like humiliation. They attach it to any sensation they don't like. Anything that's disappointing, they don't call it disappointing, they call it humiliating. And you know what? They feel humiliated. My mom called me on the phone. And this was right after I started making these distinctions. And I was out of town. And my answering service wasn't working, so I had just a machine on there. And she called, I guess, 2 or 3 times, and she got the machine. And she reached my secretary one time. She absolutely lost it. I finally got a message from her on the machine by the time I got home, and she just went on and on about how my son is not president of the United States, and who does he think he is? I got to leave a message on a machine. I want to talk to him personally. She went on and on and on. I am totally and completely humiliated. And she went absolutely crazy. So I called her up and explained to her that she should look up the word humiliation in the dictionary, and that did not build much rapport. What I began to do is tease her and harass her until I broke her what? And then I explained to her transformational vocabulary, and I explained to her everything I'd done to support her, and that she was already making herself feel horrible by selecting words that weren't appropriate. She jumped the gun, number one, in her beliefs. Number two, even if she believed something was wrong, she used a word that intensified the emotion. True or false? How many of us do this? How many of us select words that intensify our negative experience? Do you know what's good about knowing about this? One is you can break this pattern the minute you know about it. And two is, can you take pleasurable experiences and make them even more pleasurable by putting the right label on them? See, people who get around me pick up my language patterns. And one of my language patterns, most of you know, is like, for example, passion. Does it feel different to be passionate about something than it is to feel pretty good about it? Instantaneously, it's going to magnify your positive emotion. If you talk about something being exceptional, being outrageous, I feel passionate about this, those feelings are going to intensify the pleasure through the roof. But most people don't consciously select their language. So you know what they do? Most people have really intense words on the negative side and very wimpy words on the positive side, and they wonder why they have a lot more pain than pleasure in their life. It's the words you're habitually using that are shaping you. They're shaping everything, your beliefs, the way you think, and what you do. They're the building blocks of human experience. If John F. Kennedy can use words in a way that moves you, or Martin Luther King, or Winston Churchill, you can certainly use words to move yourself. And you can move yourself to tears and pain, or you can move yourself to joy and nobility. You'll determine what habits of language are you going to use. The average person's vocabulary, I started thinking, okay, I want to know more about this stuff. And that's when I found out we have 3,000 words for emotion. The average human being or English person's vocabulary, out of the 500,000 words, how many words do you think the average person uses, including its and thus? What'd you guess? I've gotten about 2,000 as the consistent feedback I've gotten from linguists. 2,000, that includes thes, ands, us, all that stuff. 2,000 words total. Out of 500,000. You want to enrich your experience of life? Remember this, your experience of life is governed by the way you use your what? Your what first? Physiology, and by the way you represent things to yourself. Remember, the way you focus, the way you represent things. If you represent things in your head with only a few words, you only got a few life experiences. Expand your vocabulary, expand your life. Enrich your vocabulary, enrich your life. See, if you want to get an idea and perspective, the Bible has 12,000 different words in it. 12,000. Milton's writing had, if I remember correctly, 25,000. Shakespeare carried, if I remember correctly, 35,000 different words in his works. In fact, he created lots of different words in our language. Lots of them. By the way, that's why his words have lasted through the ages. He figured out how to use words in such a rich way to shape human emotion and experience. He had a large palette to paint from. We need to expand our palette. And the number one place we need to expand it as a very minimum is when we're describing how we feel. We've got to be more articulate about how we feel and not so general in how we feel. That will expand our experience of life. So remember, whatever label you put on an experience becomes the experience. So how do you change this? Sometimes people raise their hand and they go, I'm feeling humiliated. And I'll say, well, are you feeling humiliated or are you feeling hurt? I'm angry. Are you angry or are you a little frustrated? You know what that does? It interrupts the what? Because for them to answer my question, they have to go inside their head and they have to picture what I talk about. At the very minimum, even though they say, no, I'm angry, still it broke their pattern for a moment. And just by offering that one word selection, you can see somebody, they go, well, I'm a little bit upset. And you can see their whole physiology change the minute they select the new word. How many have seen this happen around you? Great. Then let's do this. Sit up in your chair with some energy. And here's what I want you to do. Write down 3 words that you use habitually to describe negative emotions you feel. Okay? And come up with 3 alternatives. 3 words you use on a regular basis to describe how you feel, and come up with 3 alternative words that will either lessen the intensity or totally break the pattern. And let me give you a clue. If you come up with a word that's fun to say, you'll use it instead of the old one, because you like pleasure. If you come up with something that'll break your pattern, it's fun, that's great. But at the very minimum, make sure it'll lessen the intensity. Write down 3 words you use habitually to create negative emotions. Write down 3 alternatives. Go for it.
All right, so think of 3 words you habitually use to describe your negative emotions, and come up with 3 more empowering alternatives. Pause the audio.
Let me give you a quick example on something you might find useful. The same day I was talking to Bob about the experience he had with his daughter, we were having lunch, and we were both cranking real intensely on a lot of different things. By the way, does cranking intensely, does that take the experience we're having and probably intensify it? Yeah, but for me, those are very positive words. Would that be different if I said we were working on some notes? We were cranking intensely on a whole series of subjects, and there we were at lunch, still cranking along, and Bob turns to me and says, Tony, you know what? I can't even believe that people could ever be bored. He said, can you believe people ever get bored? He said, boredom's not even in my vocabulary. And I went, what did you just say? You just said boredom was not in your vocabulary. Remember what we talked about earlier? If boredom's not in your vocabulary and you never experience it, I wonder if there's a relationship. I wonder what would happen if you took a word out of your vocabulary, if in fact that emotion would disappear from your life. I wasn't certain, so I started to explore. I thought, what's an emotion I never feel? Never. And the answer is depression. I never feel depressed. I get frustrated or upset or tired or hurt. If I'm looking for a negative emotion, it might be those, but never depressed. And you know why? Years ago in Venice, California, I was depressed. And I linked up depression equals death, because that was the closest to death that I've ever been. And so my brain said, I will never experience that again. But what I didn't realize, and when I linked that much pain to it, my brain took it out of my habitual vocabulary, and I never used it again to describe how I was, and I've never felt it a day since. I thought, wow. I started thinking about, and I started doing research after that on cultures. There are cultures where they have no word for the word war, and in their tribe, they've never had one. Interesting. See, think about it. If you have no way to represent something, you have no way to experience it. Now, words are not the only way to represent things, because you can represent them by pictures, right? Or by sounds. But words are a primary form of representation within the human culture. If you don't have a word for it, you make it much more difficult to experience, if not impossible. You might get something similar, but if you don't label it that, you can't feel it. The label is what creates the feeling. I started thinking, this is amazing. And shortly after that, a friend of mine came to see me. He was a very successful man who was in some really tough times, going through a divorce and quite a few challenges in his business. And I'd never seen him depressed up until that point. But you know what? In a period of 20 minutes, he must use the word depressed to describe himself 15, 20 times. I mean, like constant, like one sentence, he used it 3 times. And you know, my antenna now, I'm here, depressed, transformational vocabulary, aha. That's intensifying his negative sensations. So I stopped him and I said, look, would you do me a favor? For the next 7 days, do not use the word depressed even one time to describe how you feel. For the next 7 days, I want you to describe it in a different way. Because I said, you know what, are you really depressed or are you a little bit down? Because the truth is, I know you were depressed, but you're doing things now to make it better. I mean, are you really depressed or are you a little bit down? Or are you a little frustrated or a little angry? He said, well, I guess I'm a little bit down. And you could see when he said that, he went from, I'm depressed to, well, I guess I'm a little bit down. If you had him on camera, you could see his whole body change right there in front of me. And then I explained to him this idea I had that I was calling transformational vocabulary. I said, you got to watch your TV, not the one at home, the one inside. What are you doing inside your head? What are you saying to people? What are you saying to yourself? I said, just try it for a week. You know something? That was 2 years ago. He's not felt depressed since because he won't use that word anymore. Now you say, well, isn't that just denial? Aren't you just like pushing the feelings down inside and suppressing them? No, you're transforming the experience. See, it's one thing to have you say, I feel this way, and go, no, I don't, no, I don't, no, I don't. It's another to literally transform what you're sensing by transforming what creates the triggers in your brain to feel in the first place, which is words and a large extent of your life. So what you're offering yourself a chance to do here is to take negative sensations and lower their intensity. Are there times when you want to use anger, yes or no? Absolutely, because every emotion is a resource in the right context, but you don't want those to be the tools of first resort, do you? No, then you'll be animated in a negative way all the time. So the object is not to take away certain emotions you want there. But to me, depression is not one that I see as a resource ever. So I took it out. And I didn't even realize I took it out just because I linked enough pain. And I bet you've done the same thing. I bet if you looked in your life, there are some things that are just too painful for you that one day you decide you'd never feel that way again and you don't use that word anymore to describe yourself and you don't feel the feeling. Dig through your own personal history and see if it's there. Let me tell you something even more exciting. You can also take your entire emotional life and intensify it on the positive by developing a new set of habitual words to describe how you're feeling. So instead of saying, I feel okay, pretty good, I'm not dead. You know? People have interesting ways of responding, don't they, when you say, how's it going? Right? Or just the way they describe things day to day. What I want you to do now in your notes is write down 3 positive words you use on a habitual basis, but I want you to come up with 3 new words that would intensify those positive emotions through the roof. Push those emotions through the roof. Go for it right now. Sit up in your chair with energy as you do it. Take 3 positive words you use a lot and come up with 3 alternative words that would enhance it immediately.
So you know what to do. If you're driving, think of these words in your head and write them down later. Or if you can, grab your manual and jot them down now. Again, choose 3 positive words you use and come up with 3 words that can intensify it even more. Now pause the audio and go.
How many think that if you use these words, it would really change your state? Let me see your hand say, aye. So what's going to determine whether you do it or not? Well, decision, but can't you make a decision, though, and then not follow through, only follow through for a short period of time? Yeah, what do we have to do? We have to what? Condition the what? Condition the pattern. How do you do that? Well, one way to make sure you do it is just practice doing it again and again and linking what to it? Imagine some situations. Take a nice deep breath in. Exhale slowly. Close your eyes. And think of that negative word. Out of that list of 3, pick the one that was the most negative word for you, made you feel the worst. Out of the negative list you made. And when you can remember what it was, say yes. Great. Now as you think about that for a second, just for a second, remember how it makes you feel? Think of a place where that emotion would normally come up. And when you can think of a situation where it would normally come up, say yes. Great. Now I want you to imagine yourself going into that situation by simple rehearsal. I want you to go in, and I want you to see yourself going into that state, and right as you're about to, you turn to that person or situation, you say, this, whatever your funny thing is, excuse me, no, you're tinkling me right now, whatever it is, and make yourself smile as you think about it. And then think of another one, and now make it happen rapidly. Think of it, several situations where you normally would get upset, and see yourself using this and feel yourself feeling good inside. Smile while you're doing it. Make it like a cartoon, where everything looks animated. And do it a few times, again and again. See yourself using it in all kinds of situations, work situations, home situations. And each time you do it, see it working out where it makes things better for you and where they actually respond to you better, where you're more resourceful because of it, or you're witty, or you come up with something unique because of it, or it lowers your intensity and immediately you feel better. Run at least 5 or 6 scenarios in your mind. The key is speed and emotion. Increase the emotional intensity of it. Make it more outrageous or more fun in some way. Until your brain begins to link some nice sensations to using in this future. Where would it be the best place to use this? Think about where it would be useful. Bumper-to-bumper traffic, somebody says something to you. Think about how good it would feel. What if you added to it saying this word and then laughing hysterically afterwards and you really fried their brain then? How about somebody trying to get you upset? And all of a sudden you say, you're tinkling me, and you go, ah. That would fry them pretty good, wouldn't it? And when you think you've got several places you could use this, that your brain would be willing to try, not only try, but do and utilize, say yes. And before you open your eyes, ask that part of your brain, you're going to have to trust this, the part of your brain you normally trust to make your heart beat every day. Ask that part of your brain if it'd be willing to guide you into making this choice at least for the next 10 days, and see if it works. But to do it consistently for 10 days to give it a fair shake. And then notice if you get an image that says yes, or if you just have a feeling that, yeah, I'll do that. Or if you have a voice that says yes, or if you're just willing to trust that it's there, say yes. Yes. And open your eyes, and then to ensure that the pattern is conditioned, you want to create an environment that supports you. The best and most simple way is use some leverage. You know what I did? I told all my friends. I said, you know, I used to always say I'm angry about this. Well, for the next week, I want to say instead I'm either annoyed or I'm peeved. So if I start saying, this really makes me angry, I'm giving you permission to nicely, in a loving way, say, Tone, are you angry or are you peeved? At which point I'll have a choice. I may say, I want to be angry, I'm angry, and you give me permission to do that. And as long as I know I don't have to give it up, I won't use it. And so sure enough, that's what I did. And only needed a few people, once or twice, to mention it to me, and I became anchored. Does that make sense? So that's what you're going to do. Now, when I'm listening to people talk, my brain is constantly listening for these things, because the minute you hear a word that doesn't make sense, would it make sense to interrupt the pattern at the point when the words are even being used? Would that affect what emotion somebody gets into, what beliefs they develop, yes or no? That's the basis where everything starts its structure. So if you can wipe it out before it ever gets built, you got some real power in yourself and with other people.
So today's session has been a little longer than usual, but I hope you've gotten a lot of fabulous, extraordinary, unique, fantastic, unbelievable value out of it. You've already done your assignment today with the vehicle analysis and transformational vocabulary exercises we did earlier. So you're off the hook for tonight. Start looking for new vehicles to meet your needs and start using those new words you came up with and see how it makes you feel. Okay, I know you're sad because I haven't given you an assignment. I guess you're the person that always wanted the bonus points in primary school, right? Okay, if you want bonus points, find someone and practice a skill that you aren't as sure of yet. Maybe it's one of the skills from today's session. Maybe it's even a skill you learned earlier in the program. Either way, remember, practice is how you're gonna get better. See you tomorrow.